shining wisdom's light, teaching soul tribe how to see through the night. Ancient scriptures and bloodlines she knows, spreading truth wherever she goes. Soul tribe rising, hear her call, raising vibrations for one and all. Dr. P.E.A.S.E shows the way to a brighter, freer day. Through her channel, knowledge flows, breaking chains that hold us close, teaching paths to abundance and wealth, guiding others to free themselves. Soul tribe rising, hear her call, raising vibrations for one and all. Dr. P.E.A.S.E shows the way to a brighter, freer day. From currencies to investments divine, she's helping her tribe to realign with wisdom, ancient and new, showing what we all can do. Soul tribe rising, hear her call, raising vibrations for one and all. Dr. P.E.A.S.E shows the way to a brighter, freer day. Soul tribe rising, hear her call, raising vibrations for one and all. Dr. P.E.A.S.E lights the way to a new and brighter day.
All right. Welcome, family. I'm back. I had to do that over again because we had some technical difficulties, but we are back. Please type 1 in the chat if you can hear me. I hope everybody can hear me. Yes, I am back. Welcome. Today is Wednesday, October the 22nd, 2025, and the time is 10:39 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Listen, at 12 o'clock, we are going to check in with our private group. So we do have a private group. Some of you are paid members of the private group. And I'm going to tell you something that a billionaire said in regards to money and investments. So on that channel, where it's the same channel, but here's the link here if you want to join a private membership. I'm going to talk about how if you follow the money will follow you. But let's get back to today's discussion. Yes, you all can hear me. Thank God and Goddess, because you can hear me, but I can hear an echo earlier. Welcome. Let us know how you're feeling. Tell us where you're hailing from, because we're excited to be reaching you all across the globe. I love you all so much, and I'm so very grateful that you have stayed with me throughout the different trials that we've had here on social media platforms. But we give thanks to the Most High, the creator and creatress, and to the ancestors and the YouTube gods, or those people who control YouTube and social media, for releasing me and taking off the censorship. We heard that there was a second chance program. And what happened actually was Spirit led me to look up YouTube policies the other day. And as I was looking up YouTube policies, because I said, Spirit, this is what I've been called to do. My vision and mission is literally to liberate humanity. So I can do other things on the side, but this is my main job. And I said, Spirit, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep going. I kept posting, even though they had demonetized my platforms. I had 9 channels. They all were demonetized, so I wasn't able to get paid, but I kept posting anyway, and we stayed faithful. We stayed faithful to the charge that the ancestors had given us. And as I was looking up the YouTube policies, I stumbled across an article that the ancestors and creators allowed me to see, and it said YouTube has a second chance program, and it had just been published the day before. So this was just like about 3 days ago. So what I did is what I had always done. I continued to appeal. I had been appealing for about almost 3 years, because my first channel, where I had over 30,000 subscribers and well over 2 million views on my first channel from years ago, I wasn't getting monetized from that. And they kept telling me, you'll never be able to appeal this one. So all of my channels I kept appealing to, and they finally released me, thank goodness, and gave me a second chance. So I want to thank President Donald Trump and his administration for that, because I'm sure he has something to do with that. So hi, everyone. I can see your wrench. I can see your wrench, Love Being Newbie. And you said it's gone, but I can see it. I'll double check and make sure you are still the monitor here. So what does a billionaire have to say? Ooh, child. A lot about what's happening to the dollar, and how even though you may consider yourself broke, which I wouldn't call myself broke, Sinbad, because broke infers that you're broken, and you're not broken. Okay. Your spirit and you may feel a little tired at times, but you are a whole healthy individual. We declare it. We command that to be so. So you may not have the money that you would like to see, or your budget may not allow for certain things, but I'm going to tell you that a billionaire actually told you what to do. And I had talked about that in May on our private channel. And he said something else today. So if you're interested, then click on the link and follow the link to join the group. So today I asked the question, will we initiate martial law, or will we be under martial law? Many people have already said that we're under martial law. Martial law just refers to the times in United States history or American history in which a region, a state, or maybe the whole country is actually under the control of the military. The whole military is under control, is controlling what happens in your country, with the government, with the policies, homeland security, all that. So I would say that we're already under military occupation, because President Trump had actually released the National Guard and other troops on the ground in 2020, remember? And then most recently, he did the same thing. What he did was he said that he released them in major cities. So we are already really under martial law, but can he and will he invoke the Insurrection Act? That is the main question. Now, he did say that he will possibly initiate the Insurrection Act the other day, and I'll show you where he said that. In fact, he didn't just say it, he threatened to initiate the Insurrection Act. So let me ask the question and then I'll answer it. What is the Insurrection Act? The Insurrection Act of 1807 is the United States federal law that empowers the President of the United States to nationally deploy the United States military and to federalize the National Guard units of the individual states in specific circumstances. Circumstances such as suppression of civil disorder, which we see happening with all these No King protests that Antifa and other entities have instigated or initiated. He can suppress civil disorder, he can suppress insurrection and armed rebellion. And all that is important, and I'll tell you why. If in fact you have any of those things, any type of civil disorder, any type of insurrection or armed rebellion, the President of the United States can invoke the Insurrection Act. Look up the Insurrection Act of 1807, and it should tell you the times in history when this actually occurred. So then the question becomes, or the follow-up questions become, are we experiencing civil disorder? Do we see a possibility of an insurrection or armed rebellion? Maybe we need to look up the word insurrection. But I can tell you there is armed rebellion because we've seen and heard of gangbangers actually threatening President Donald Trump and the military and National Guard, saying, you better not come here because we'll take up arms and we'll deal with you. They're not only doing it on their YouTube platforms, they're doing it in the middle of the streets. They're doing it on TikTok. And I'm talking about gangbangers in these big cities like Chicago, big cities like New York and Baltimore, and not just American or so-called Black American and American gangbangers, but I'm talking about Venezuelan gangbangers, MS-13 gangbangers, militia, Venezuelan and related and Mexican related gangbangers, saying, we're not afraid of President Trump. He better not send out the military, the National Guard to try to keep us from occupying projects or apartment complexes. He better not try to keep us from crossing the border because we'll deal with him. Well, you know what? When you get haughty and you think that you are strong enough to take over the military, then President Trump might have to lock things down. I'm talking about cities, states, and possibly the whole country in order to maintain order, because what's happening behind the scenes and actually in front of the scenes is people are being arrested. Now, we've been saying that for a while and people thought we were crazy, but you did just see James Comey get arrested, right? The head of the FBI. And we know, and you can look it up, judges have been arrested right in the courtroom. So President Trump can, and in fact, he likely will invoke the Insurrection Act. So let me look, what is an insurrection? Somebody put in the chat, what is an insurrection? It's just simply a violent uprising against the authority of the government. A violent uprising against the authority of the government is what we have heard is actually occurring, right? Or can actually occur because of the threats that people are actually instigating against President Donald Trump and the military. And we have the greatest military in the world. I don't know why they would do that. So my question was, will martial law be enacted? And I'm telling you, it already has been enacted. As a matter of fact, let me see if I can find you this book that I have. I do have a book about military law. I bought the book so that I can stay abreast on what's going on. It's a military law manual published by the Department of Defense. If you ever get a chance, read it, look through it, or at least do some video checks on it. According to this law manual, if there are some threats of insurrection, the president can use his powers, his executive order, to actually enforce the Insurrection Act and actually hold down the fort, the country, and silence those threats against the government and against we the people. So military law looks like we're already under military law, and we have been since 2020. And we saw President Trump talk about, and he actually did deploy National Guard in 2020. And then recently he deployed National Guard. He said in major states, but he also said in major cities. And he also said that he'll probably send out more troops. And I'll show you articles there too. We also have seen many videos. I want you all to follow me. And when I get finished, I'll click links to some of these videos where you see women taken to their social media platforms saying that they got notified that they won't receive their food stamps as of November the 1st. And so what they're saying throughout these compilation of videos is, if I don't get my food stamps by November the 1st, then I'm going to steal. These women are bold and brazen, letting people know that they intend to steal out of the grocery stores. And they're even inciting violence, some of them, and telling people to take up arms. I want you to look up the compilation of videos while they go and steal. Now, that's an embarrassment. Now, I can understand and understand why people might get angry, a little frustrated, a little concerned or worried if they think that their benefits are going to get cut off. But the purpose of government aid was not to get us so reliant on the government, dependent upon the government, that we don't create means of providing for ourselves and create businesses or get married and build together, family unit, and then build out from one family to another and create communities. The purpose of the government assistance allegedly was to help people temporarily. That's why welfare benefits is called TANF, temporary assistance for needy families, temporary assistance for needy families. But what happened is sometimes once you get food stamps, TANF, Medicare, Medicaid, all that's welfare, even some government loans, that's really all welfare, okay? You can get so conditioned to accept those entitlement benefits that you get lazy and it squelches your power and your initiative. And then your drive, gets squelched because you get free handouts. So you have the free handouts, and then you have social media that keeps you lazy and keeps you, or it could potentially keep you so focused on what's going on in everybody else's life that you lose your drive to get out and meet people, get out and find people to marry. You lose your drive to actually mate and procreate. People lose their drive to create businesses. So you have the government medicating you, then you have drugs medicating you, then you have social media medicating you and distracting you to the extent that you now become so dependent upon the system that you don't want to work. And I've actually heard women take to their social media platform and say, I don't want to work. Why would I get out there and work when I have free benefits and I'm getting thousands of dollars in food stamps and thousands of dollars in cash? And I feel it, because that's what happened also when people were getting stimulus checks, right? Some people got so comfortable that they kept, getting those checks and spending. Then they got PPP loans, I think it was. And instead of putting some of that money where it should go, some people just got comfortable accepting government handouts. But notice that the government is guilty because they gave out those handouts and they continue to give out those handouts in order to keep the people complacent so that the people can be lazy and more easily controlled. You squelch their initiative and their drive for working, their drive for creating businesses, you squelch their drive for mating, creating families. Then you have a low population. Nobody's making love. If you're lazy and you're stuck in the house on your cell phone and you're stuck at work, if you have a job, going between the computer, looking at Facebook and social media platforms and your phone and trying to work, if you are so distracted and divided and so complacent that you lose your drive, you will start to feel entitled. Hence the reason a lot of women are taking to social media platforms and saying, I need my money. And if I don't get my money because I'm entitled, then I'm going to not create a job or a business, but I'm going to steal. And you know what happens when you steal, my dear sisters, all across the globe? You go to jail. Do you know what happens when you take to social media and you brag about what you're going to do? They take pictures of you and they record you and they know where you live. They have facial recognition too if you think you're going to wear a mask and go into a store and steal. But this is what we see happening. You see people saying they're going to steal. You see gangbangers saying they're going to have a face-off with the military. You see MS-13 gang members saying they are going to fight the National Guard. You see all of this happening that could lead to President Donald Trump invoking the Insurrection Act. One of the major things that's happening right now, family, is the No Kings Act. The protests. It's interesting that they call it No Kings. And anytime they have something like this to happen where they actually have a name for their violence or their insurrections, this is something that is propagated by a party or an entity that have millions or maybe even billions of dollars to fund these protests. Just like we discovered that Black Lives Matter, also known as BLM, and Antifa was funded by George Soros, the billionaire. And Act Blue, which also funds the Democratic Party. Those entities were funding Antifa and Black Lives Matter to incite people to protest, but really to violently riot. So what they do is they stage protests, they pay for them, and then they actually hire actors to infiltrate these protests that are made up of regular everyday people. But these paid actors infiltrate these protests, and they are given hotels, they're given food, they're given ammunition. I saw it happen in Louisville, Kentucky in 2020. They are told what to do. They incite violence. They have these slogans that they use that cast negative affirmations on people, like "I can't breathe," "hands up, don't shoot," "hands up, don't shoot," telling everybody to just surrender, put your hands up, don't shoot, that kind of thing. But they would do it in front of the National Guard, to the police, like to taunt them. The "I can't breathe" thing, when George Floyd died and some other men of color died or were killed, allegedly unalived by police officers. To me, that was cast, and some other gentlemen casting negative affirmations, because saying that you can't breathe means that you're not living. Why would you walk around saying "I can't breathe"? That's stupid. I never understood it, but hey, who am I? Also paying that one football player, what's his name? Start with a Kaepernick, to get on his knees during the national anthem just seemed like kind of weird to me, or doing a pledge of allegiance to the flag or something like that, because taking a knee to something is an obeisance posture. But people don't understand or understand that these people are paid agents that are paid to get the masses to go along with whatever Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and any of those other funded organizers have in mind for them to do. If you look at the nokings.org website, you'll see that nearly 7 million people attended an overwhelmingly peaceful No Kings Day of Action. They're calling it peaceful, but some people have actually said that these protests have gotten out of hand. This is an article that says it came out of DC, and one of the largest single-day nationwide demonstrations in United States history. Nearly 7 million Americans gathered, 2 million more than in June, in over 2,700 cities and towns for the No Kings Day of peaceful action, standing together in nonviolent defiance of authoritarianism and affirming that this nation belongs to its people, not to kings. So, who has the money to fund a so-called peaceful protest of 7 million people? This is not a grassroots effort. This is a paid so-called protest that looks like, or they're pretending to care about we the people, and they're saying their problem is with President Donald Trump, saying that he's going to secure the borders. They have a problem with Donald Trump saying President Donald Trump saying he's going to send out National Guard to get rid of illegal migrants. They have a problem with President Donald Trump shutting down the government. Okay, they're blaming the government shutdown on him. But let's read a little bit further before I go on. With more than 2,700 lawful and peaceful protests across all 50 states, today's mobilization was 14 times larger than both of President Donald Trump's presidential inaugurations combined, making a historic moment of unity and resistance. Resistance. Notice the word. What are they resisting against? And how do they intend to enforce whatever their so-called demands are? Formal or complaints have come across many people's desks to let them know that these so-called peaceful protests are in fact not peaceful at all in some of these cities. But let's go on and read this. From rural communities to major metropolitan centers, the message was clear. America will not be ruled by fear, force, or one man's power grab. So what are you going to do? You're not going to be ruled by fear, force, or one man's power grab. So what are you going to do? You're going to fight the government. You're going to fight the United States military. You're going to fight the National Guard. You're going to fight against President Trump, who actually was crowned king by many different countries, such as Saudi Arabia under his first administration. We saw it during the sword dance. You really think you're going to fight the largest military in the world? You have no common sense. While the Republican-led government shutdown continues to wreak havoc, according to this article found on nokings.org website, forcing hundreds of thousands of families to go without pay and cutting off critical services, the people they represent are stepping up to lead. Across districts, neighborhoods, and neighbors are organizing, marching, and demanding a government that serves the many, not the powerful few. Our work continues, they say, in big cities and small towns around this country, and we will not back down to President Donald Trump's continued abuse of power, they say on this website. There will be no regular opportunities in the coming days and weeks to take action with no kings, and we will be regularly sharing community right resources. I'm just going to let that sink in for a minute. They talk about how millions of Americans have stood together to fight against President Donald Trump. And I'll put this in the description section for you and in the chat. I'm done with these people. I do know that if a government takes power away from the people, then as we the people, we can lawfully, according to our Constitution for the Republic, create a militia and take down those rogue elements. But you better know what you're doing, and you better have a rightful claim to do that. Okay, you better know exactly what you're doing. It kind of reminds me of like J6 when they went in and they actually overtook the Capitol, because the Capitol is the people's house. And then the gentleman actually staked a totem pole, which was the gentleman that was dressed as an indigenous American. So that looked more like what the Constitution was talking about. But forming these protests in large cities and instigating the police to hit them is a whole nother thing. Let me know what you think in the comment section. So let's talk about what a lawful protest really is when you break down the etymology of the word and you look in Black's Law Dictionary, the law dictionary that our system operates by. According to Black's Law Dictionary, a protest is actually a formal complaint that a person has against an entity, a government, a department, or whatever. A formal complaint that is written, a written formal complaint that is notarized, and then it goes through certain policies and procedures, certain means in order to eradicate or deal with your complaint. A formal written complaint. That's what a lawful protest is. It's not taking to the streets. It's not forming groups and gangs. It's not even marching. I know that Martin Luther King or Michael Luther King, or whatever his legal government name is, told everybody that a protest was taken to the streets and singing Kumbaya and we shall overcome, and locking arm in arms, and going against the police and going against dogs and taking your children and dragging them through the street and allowing them to get knocked upside the head while you sing Kumbaya. I know that's what he may have taught you, but I also know that he was friends with the Rothschilds and took many pictures with them and literally said out his mouth that I fear I have taken my people into a burning house. Okay. His way of repenting for actually leading folk into this so-called protest that caused a lot of people to lose their lives. Now, I'm not against organizing protests if that's what you want to do, if that's your thing, but it won't be happening with me because I know what a lawful protest is according to Black's Law Dictionary. And I know that I have more common sense than to use my time to take to the streets, to just scream and holler and chant, when I could actually be affecting change by operating at the state level, because according to the Constitution, at the state level and state entities has more power than the federal government. So if we really want to affect change, you can affect change by working at the state level, because each state in America is actually its own country. America is a continent. Each state has its own laws, its own flag, its own anthem. If you really want to affect change, don't just start at the state level, start with yourself by not acting like a slave, but acting like a sovereign and being a sovereign, being free. Start with yourself by knowing that you are God in flesh, knowing that you are a child of God, if that makes you feel more comfortable. Now, the scripture says ye are gods, but if that doesn't make you feel comfortable, knowing that the scripture says if you are a Christian or a Jew, because the Old Testament says that the creator or God, the creator, the God of the Bible, gave you dominion. So if you have dominion and ye are gods, or you are children of gods, and greater works than these can you do, as the Messiah said, because he goes to the Father, then why are you taking to the streets screaming and hollering and chanting when you can affect change by first changing your mindset? I'm not a slave. Tell yourself you're not a slave. You are sovereign. You are God's in flesh, and act like it. Study and know the Constitution, your rights according to the Constitution, and then look for information to back you up when you operate in your sovereign capacity. So some people have to do a radical mind change. Slaves take and depend on handouts from the government. So I saw a lot of women, and even in my family, use welfare benefits to become something that's a generational handicap. So now you see women saying, oh my God, the government is taking away my benefits. I'm going to have to start stealing. Well, what the government is really doing is removing benefits. And I'm going to talk about that in depth in a little bit, because the United States government is a foreign entity that was unlawful and treasonous. So when the government removes those entitlement benefits, they will replace it with something else by way of our republic and Nasara law, something that we've been talking about a very long time. I'm going to answer your questions and I see you all in the chat. So I want to encourage everybody to hold on. I know a lot of people are, losing hope, or we're hanging on by a thread, but I need to first address the fact that we need to do a radical mind change. We need to have a paradigm shift. You're not a slave. You're not a citizen. A citizen is a slave. Chief Mack says a citizen sits in sin. A citizen is synonymous with slave. You're sovereign. Sovereign, when you break down the word, sov means over. Reign means control. You have control over your own destiny. You have control over your own mind. You have control over your own body. You will have control over your own trust. Do a radical mind change, a paradigm shift from slavery to sovereignty. I am God in flesh. The scripture says in Psalms, know you not that you are gods? Then the Christ came back in the New Testament and said, didn't your own law tell you you were gods? If you don't believe in that, then some of you have said that we are humans, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Now, when you study the law of assumption and Neville Goddard's laws, which actually are based on universal laws, you know that you can change your reality. And that frequency actually bends towards reality. Reality bends towards frequency. So whatever frequency upon which you resonate, whichever frequency you resonate on, is what actually affects your reality. So if we're constantly thinking we're a slave, you need to check your frequency. If you're constantly having bad experiences, we need to check our frequency. If we're constantly dependent on the government, we need to check our frequency. If we're constantly using drugs, if we're constantly being involved in violent acts, check your frequency, because whatever you think about and focus on is what magnifies. Whatever you think about and focus on is what multiplies. But when you think and know that you're sovereign, and you attach an emotion to being completely free, and you imagine how and what that feels like. Even if you have to study it, what does it mean to be sovereign? And you imagine it and you think about it and you feel that emotion, that means you will vibrate on a certain frequency that will then ensure that all of your experiences will be in alignment with your frequency. Reality bends towards frequency. If you're always operating at a negative frequency, then you're going to have negative experiences. If we're always operating on a positive frequency, then we're going to have positive experiences. And I'm saying that as one who was raised by a mother who had me at 15 years old, a father who was 17, who struggled with drugs, who passed away in my arms. Born to teenagers in the projects of Cleveland, Ohio, around 30th and Central, Cleveland, Ohio. For everybody who's from Cleveland, Ohio, you know that's a very rough area. Father wasn't in the home. Parents weren't married. But my mother never allowed me to say I can't. My mother never allowed me to talk about racism and not having the same as everybody else. My mother never allowed me to do any of that. My mother said, you will thrive and you will succeed. And she ensured that. She cut out articles that were positive. She had me at 15. She would place them on the refrigerator and she would say, read these articles. She had me reading books before I started kindergarten. She bought with a couple of dollars flashcards and had my brother and me, who are only 9 months apart, to test each other on math, subtraction, multiplication, addition, division, so that we excelled all the way up through school, reading before we even started school, writing my mother reaction papers to the articles that she placed on the refrigerator. She had us reading encyclopedias that she somehow was able to get through her little bit of money that she had while she was working at Zayre's. Zayre's was like a Walmart back in the day, or Walmart, Target, but it was the precursor to that Big Bear. She worked at Zayre's. She had us reading. She had us studying. She made us watch our vocabulary. You can only say I can. You could not say I can't. You would get severely punished for saying I can't. She would make us write reaction papers to whatever we read. And if she saw one negative or sloppy print on it or eraser mark, she would tear it up, rip it up, throw it away and say, do it again. She had us rising up before the sun was up because she wanted to teach us how to be sharp and how to be on time. When the sun was up, we were up. We made our bed, we had breakfast, we did our chores before school, and we read all before school. We ironed our own clothes. We washed the baseboards. We scrubbed the floors. I'm talking about scrubbing on your hands and knees with a rag and some pine saw, whatever she could afford, because she wanted to teach us that you are the master of your own reality. This is the way she conditioned us. She conditioned us to fast, because I grew up in the Nation of Islam before we started really heavily getting into Judaism and studying our Hebrew culture. So in the Nation of Islam, you learn to be disciplined. My mother had discipline, order, and structure in her home. And that's the way I became who I am today. And that's the way I raised my children. So there was no excuses. There was no taking no handouts. You create your own path. You don't talk about what you can't do. You have to be disciplined in your reading, disciplined in your study, disciplined in your thoughts, disciplined in your diet. So we fasted in the Nation of Islam and in our Hebrew tradition. You fast for 24 hours during the Day of Atonement, and you also have several fasts throughout the year where you abstain from food because it teaches your body to be subject to your mind, to your will. But now we have lots of people complaining, commiserating because they have no discipline, no structure, and no order. So the people you see taken out to the streets, some of them mean well, but a lot of them have no discipline. The people that are on social media talking about they're going to fight a military looking stupid and foolish have no discipline, many of them. Dragging your children out in the middle of the street, fighting against a military. I saw it happen in 2020. That's why I left Louisville, Kentucky. Pastors taken to the street. Pastors, many of whom are part of the Freemason, the Boule, if you were in the Black community classified as Black, Skull and Bones, telling people to take to the streets and fight the powers that be. Arming people with bombs and hand grenades. I saw it. So these pastors were taken to the streets. Some of them still are today in this No King rally, but they're in cahoots with the party that's funding these protests, these riots. And we don't even know that we're being used because a lot of these pastors are paid agents. That's why they pledged. They pledged in college thinking they were doing a good thing, and they know that you would get favors. People would place you in different positions and jobs. But what they may not have known is if you want to move up, you move on from Black Greek societies and regular Greek societies to the Boule, Skull and Bones, Freemasonry, etc. And you have to do a lot of heinous things during your rituals, like get on your knees and be blindfolded while they beat you up over the head, or have you sucking somebody's phallus and telling you that this is how you have to keep your own people blind, stupid, and liking their same sex. And they would take even the Freemason Skull and Bones. I don't care if they were classified as white or Black. They would take a Black man, so-called Black man or brother, an indigenous man off the street, blindfold him, bring him into their rituals, and tell these people who were taking these pledges and these Freemasonic orders, this is your father, because they know that all races, according to science, come from the melanated man. This is your father. Don't let him rise above you, and then beat him and have you to beat him. These are the people that's leading some of these churches. These are the people that are leading some of these corporations and banks. They were. That have been forced to resign. If you look up resignation.info, you will see all the forced resignations. So people are taken to the streets, not understanding and understanding that they are being misled and misguided by their leaders. Misled and misguided by people who are pretending to care for we the people. But let me tell you something. The government had to shut down, okay? The government was shut down on September the 30th at midnight, which is actually the beginning of October the 1st, my birthday, and also the beginning of a new fiscal year. October 1st was actually also the Day of Atonement for Hebrew people. It was a Day of Atonement where we fast for 24 hours to atone for our sins, to become at one mind or mentality with God. That's why you fast for 24 hours. So the government was shut down on September the 30th at midnight, which was actually October 1st, for many reasons. Number one, the government has a lot to atone for. They have wronged the people. They have enslaved the people through taxes, enslaved the people through all type of policies and codes that they had their policy enforcers to force us to abide by. And if we didn't abide by them, we got knocked over the head or handcuffed, dragged into the court, which is a part of the United States Incorporated, forced to pay fines, put in jail, and while they were accessing our birth certificate bonds. So the United States Incorporated has a lot to atone for. The United States Incorporated usurped our lawful republic. Listen to me. The United States Incorporated is a group of bloodline families that usurped authority from our lawful republic, first enslaving the autogenous, original, indigenous, copper-colored races found in America by Christopher Columbus. Those are the original Americans. Look up original definition for American, or the 1828 Webster's definition for American. Copper-colored races found by Christopher Columbus, but now applied to Europeans. So these bloodline families, 13 bloodline families, are actually controlled by another 13 bloodline families who are also controlled by non-human beings. So the group of bloodline families that usurped authority from the republic and the autogenous, indigenous, copper-colored races found here in America that people call Negro, Black, colored, and African American, that group of bloodline families incorporated itself as a nonprofit religious organization in 1871 in the state of Delaware, with the Pope as its head, working in cahoots with the British Crown. That is the United States Incorporated. Then you have the FBI, the CIA, the IRS, and there were 441 government agencies. Now there are 442, which are really just corporate entities that call themselves a part of the government that has nothing to do with our lawful government, but they are in cahoots with the United States Incorporated. All of those agencies, 441, I'll find them for you. They call themselves government, CPS. But what did they do? They created statutes, codes, and policies that were against sovereign individuals, against we the people, so that they could enslave us and keep us worn down and abiding by all of so many policies, statutes, and codes that we couldn't even focus on our mission and our purpose of being here as God beings and spiritual beings here on the planet. Kept us so distracted and so beat down that we couldn't create businesses. We can hardly create healthy, thriving families. Kept us so busy and distracted by Hollywood, which, by the way, is dead now. And that's why nobody's really making movies, because Hollywood was a branch of the CIA. Kept us so focused on Hollywood and even school books, Rothschild schools and school education, keeping us slaves, or programming us to believe any lie that they told us, that we couldn't focus on thriving. But last year, the Supreme Court of the United States overturned the Chevron doctrine. The Chevron doctrine gave the United States Incorporated, the fake faux government, the power to do whatever they wanted to do because they were the experts. The Chevron doctrine said that all of those agencies, 441 or 442 of them, could create any policies they desire, any statutes or any codes, and we had to abide by them. Well, last year, the Supreme Court of the United States overturned the United States Incorporated. Behind the scenes, President Trump and all of the people that were working with him, including the military and the Moors, because there are Moors working behind the scenes, the autonomous indigenous peoples on here working behind the scenes, bankrupted the United States Incorporated. Behind the scenes, they bankrupt them. So the United States Incorporated is bankrupt and defunct. And then last year, when the Supreme Court of the United States overturned the Chevron doctrine, the Supreme Court, judges or leaders said that the United States Incorporated and their 441 agencies they were unlawful and treasonous. When you say something is unlawful and treasonous, you're saying they're going against we the people, and they're foreign enemies of we the people. That's why we had a government shutdown. The precursor was the Supreme Court of the United States overturning the Chevron doctrine. Not only did they say that the government, the United States Incorporated, and those government agencies, and I'll show you those right now, were unlawful and treasonous, but they said, Grand Rising, darling, that any judge that forced you to pay fines to any of those agencies, any of them that did that, were now deemed as treasonous. They committed treason just like those government agencies. Any judge that forced you to pay a fine and went along with those government agencies have been deemed as treasonous. And any judge that knew of a judge that allowed that to happen and he didn't report it to the president, he committed misprision of treason. So you have the United States Incorporated and all of those government agencies. I'm going to show you the 442 of them. It was 441, but once the government went down, they listed 442. So the government agencies committed treason. The United States Incorporated committed treason. The judges that went along with and forced you to pay a fine, they committed treason. And the judges that went along with those judges and didn't report it to the president, they committed misprision of treason. And here you see the list of agencies. It says the list of agencies. This list includes each unique federal and quasi-federal unit that has legal authority, not lawful authority. Legal authority means authority according to the United States Incorporated, and authority according to the United States Incorporated and the Constitution of the United States Incorporated. That's legal. What's lawful is anything that's in alignment with the Constitution for our republic, our lawful government. So this list of agencies includes each unique federal and quasi-federal unit that has legal authority to publish in the Federal Register. And that has published in the past, even if it no longer publishes, either because of an agency redelegation of authority, or because the unit no longer exists. This ensures all past documents remain indexed and available on the website. Here is the list of 442 government agencies that had to be taken down. You see the administrative conference. Thank you for the Cash App blessing, family. I appreciate you. For those that are donating to my work, thank you so much. I will give you a shout out when I finish the podcast. The Administrator Conference of the United States. You see the Agriculture Department. I'll go all the way to all those dealing with food, Rural Business Cooperation, Air Quality Control. You'll see HOAs on here, which are under Department of Defense. All of from A to Z is listed here. So when the Supreme Court of the United States, I'm going to put this in the chat here, and I'll also put it in the description section for you. When the Supreme Court of the United States overturned the Chevron doctrine, they again declared that the United States Incorporated and all 441 or 442 now government agencies were treasonous and unlawful. That meant they had to be taken down because they're enemies to we the people. That is why President Trump, as soon as he came on board as the president, tasked Elon Musk with leading the Department of Government Efficiency to downsize the government. This is happening for us, not against us. At the same time as President Trump and Elon Musk started downsizing the government, President Trump did something else. On January the 28th, 2025, he sent out a letter to millions of people. Was it 20 million or 2 million people? Let me see. Millions of people. Let me see. Trump sends letter. Was it 20 million? He sent letters to 20 million people to give them the opportunity to take an early retirement. 20 million government workers. Let me see if it was 20 million. I want to get this right. Let me see how many. I think it was, you guys let me know, correct me, let me know if it was 2 million or 20 million. He was offering buyouts to all federal employees who opted to leave their jobs. The date, he did it on January the 28th. The date or the deadline was September the 30th. That is when the government shut down. So you had thousands of people who took the buyout and retired early to actually leave on September the 30th, which was also the eve of the Day of Atonement and the eve of the government shutdown. Again, the reason why the government shut down is because it's a fake, faux entity masquerading as our lawful government, which in fact they are instead a group of bloodline families that usurped the land here in America, made the people here, our ancestors here, prisoners of war, changed the classification of the indigenous autogenous people here in America from free white persons, the copper color races, changed their classification or their lawful or legal status from free white persons to colored, black, colored again, Negro, and African American in order to confuse them first and to confuse other people. So these group of bloodline families made these people, the copper color races, the prisoners of war. And this is why they lied to them and told them you came from African slave ships. You were originally from Africa because they wanted to disinherit them from the land. Also, these bloodline families, and this has nothing to do with complexion of who's the ruling class of these bloodline families, because I've told you many times, the Rockefellers and Rothschilds, they might appear as being Caucasoid or Caucasian, but who are the bloodline families that's controlling them? I've shown you the list. Those people are Moors, according to our research. Those people are brown. Those people are the people that controlled and ruled Spain and Europe. From the books say 711 to 1492 when they came here and then overruled us. But I would say they ruled before 711 because all of Europe started out as melanated. Okay, so this group of bloodline families that controlled Europe from 711, according to the recent books, to 1492, came over here, took over the landmass here, misclassified the people, brought colonies over here, and put them in certain areas, position them in certain areas so that those people can, have their own government, do their own way of life. And very interesting how they did that, because then they brought a lot of people from all over the world to come here to take the resources or utilize the resources in the land, and et cetera, and to use the free white person status. I don't care what their skin complexion looked like. While we were the free white persons on the land, they changed our status to black, because black is a standing in law. That means you have no lawful standing. It means you're a slave. But when the colonies came here, they had black status because they were coming to a foreign land, and they had been slaves to the Moors or whomever was controlling Europe at the time. That's why. And they even said, bring your sick, bring the ones in your infirm, bring the ones who are in prison, bring the criminals. They didn't care. Those were the slaves that had black status. But you know how the United States Incorporated is. They'll switch things around in order to confuse you. So they enslaved the planet, enslaved the people here, or made the copper color races here actually become prisoners of war. And let me show you. While the colonies were here, actually, operating in commerce, some of them had treaties with the copper colored races here. They were doing businesses mostly by themselves, but with the copper colored races here, and minding their own business. But what happened was the bloodline families did certain things to instigate a fight between, or war between, the copper colored races, indigenous, autogenous, so-called Black Negro people here in America, and the colonies, or the people that came here, the European here. They instigated war and fights between them. They wouldn't allow them to get married. At first, they were marrying each other, making love, making treaties, making babies, doing business with each other. But the bloodline families pit them against each other. And if you follow Chief Rod Hayes, also known as Chief Pontiac, who I hope to get back on the show soon, he tells you that blackface and entertainment and in those movies, they told you was something that was done to actually cause the copper colored people to get angry. But really what they were doing was, it was actually the European people that will cover their faces in black paint to say, it ain't us running the show. It's these, what people call dirty Moors, or the dark races of people. The Moors, they might be my cousins, brothers, I don't know who they are, that ruled Spain and ruled all of Europe, that brought the colonists here, because Christopher Columbus was a melanated man. They're in control. That's what the blackface was about. They're in control. We're not running anything. They got us here, telling us we can have free land, telling us we're going to be free from all of the enslavement that was going on in Europe. And yes, they gave us land, and yes, they gave us resources, and they gave us positions to be above the prisoners of war in the banks, in entertainment, in hospitals, in schools, in government. But it ain't us. And so when they were shucking and jiving and putting on the black face, they were trying to send a code and message that said, it's them. It's the secret 13 bloodline families that's controlling the bloodline families that you think run the planet, like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the Carnegies. They ain't really the ones running things, is what these people were trying to tell us, according to Chief Pontiac. But because I wanted you to see something, when you read the book, The Prince, by Niccolo Machiavelli, you learn that there are two ways that you can take over a country. The first way is to send in the military. That's one of the ways. Because when you send in the military, you can just take everything over by force and by violence. The second way you can control a landmass and take over a territory is by sending in colonies. You send in colonies according to The Prince. The author of this book was, again, Niccolo Machiavelli. You put in colonies in certain key places, and those people will have an alignment with you, an allegiance to whoever is enslaving that landmass, because you gave me resources, you gave me land, you allowed me to have a treaty with the people on the land. But I'm impoverished and I'm hungry and I'm in a new area and I don't know the language. So what am I going to do? I'm dependent upon the bloodline families or the people that sent me in, unbeknownst to me, to colonize the people that were already there. Brilliant book. So the British, the Moors who controlled all of Europe, that brought the colonists here, they had a master plan, and their overlords are not human. That's why they do such inhumane things, like do things to children and or organs and your mind through programming and drugs. Those non-human beings and their human hybrids who brought, according to this book, most likely is the reason they brought colonies or colonies of group of people here. They did it under the masquerade of, we're liberating y'all from Europe. We're making, we're giving you a better place to go. But when you get to that place, you have an allegiance to the people who brought you here. And you either do what we say or we take you out. And what are you going to do? You're hungry. You're separated from your family. Your family in Europe was abused by the same people that's abusing the American people here. What do? You do as you're told. Okay. And then you put them in key positions and have better jobs than the people that are enslaved here or people that are prisoners of war. And then you cause infighting. Then once they're fighting against each other, you pass laws that they can't marry each other, or else they'll go to prison or they'll be killed. And then you put programming through Hollywood movies and movies like Roots. By the way, Alex Haley, who produced the Roots movie, was sued by Harold Kurlander. Harold Kurlander was a European or a Caucasian man who wrote a book called The African. Harold Kurlander said, that guy named Alex Haley who wrote the book Roots and said his family was from Africa and they came across the Atlantic through the transatlantic slave ship ordeal, and he had Kunta Kinte and Kizzy and Chicken George, and those were all his family members, and they not only wrote the book called Roots, but they created a whole series and a whole movie based on that book to try to indoctrinate people, especially those that look like me, to make them think that they came from Africa on the slave ship. Yeah, that guy, he was a part of the CIA programming, Harold Kurlander said, and I sued him because he stole my character from my book called The African, and Harold Kurlander won his case because allegedly, according to the case, Alex Haley committed plagiarism. So that was just one case of programming, Roots. And you have all these Hollywood movies. I'm a slave, 12 years a slave, Django, Massa don't treat me right. Oh, Massa done raped and did bad things to his mistress. I mean, we know that those things occur, but when you watch it time and time again, then you develop hatred. And then you put in programs to make people think, like critical race theory. And I understand and overstand affirmative action. I understand DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, all that. But what you do is you create those programs and you tell people that look like me, you need these because you was a slave and you've always been a slave and you came from an African slave ship and your mammy and pappy was a slave and your grandmammy and grandpappy and great grandmammy and grandpappy, yeah, they was all slaves too. And so since you always gonna be a slave, and you was enslaved by the European man, you need these programs. So when you feed children this from the time they come out the womb and daycare until they graduate from college, they will develop a slave mentality. But thanks be to the Most High, Lolita Johnson, my mother, Lolita Janie Johnson, said, not on my watch, you won't. She never allowed us to watch television. I shouldn't say never. When she did, we were allowed to watch Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, etc. And then she said, you know what? I'm unplugging it all. Because she didn't want our minds to be programmed. She didn't watch it. Okay? She made us read books. She made us, like I said, fast. She taught us to eat to live. She had us reading Honorable Elijah Muhammad book, Eat to Live, that you only need 1 meal a day. You eat in order to sustain your body. You don't live to eat. She didn't allow us to eat sugar growing up. She taught us how to fast, and she had us on a raw fruits and vegetable diet during a certain period of our life, and then we became vegans. And later on, as we become older, she allowed us to eat meat, but they still had to be classified as clean meat, according to the Hebrew law and the Nation of Islam. Look it up, clean meat. If it's a beast, it has to have cloven hoof and chew cud. If it's a fowl, there are certain fowls of the air we're allowed to eat. If there's fish, they had to have fins and scales. I opted as an adult many years ago to go back to veganism because it's the best diet for me. And raw veganism is actually the optimal diet. But my mother didn't allow us to be enslaved mentally. We need to do a radical mind change, family. Is this just history or RV news? It's what I'm giving you. That's what it is. So you can take it or you can watch it later and fast forward on too. Okay. My channel, I talk about family, wealth, and legacy. If you want RV news only, or you want to listen to gurus, there are channels that will do that. I'm about family, wealth, and legacy. I'm building up the community. I'm liberating humanity all across the globe. So you're going to get a history lesson included with RV news. Okay. So these things that happen to enslave the planet, and I'm setting the stage for what's happening and why you have a government shutdown. These beings enslaved the planet, starting out with the indigenous people here. And then the civil rights movement wasn't really about doing away with slavery. It was about expanding slavery. I want you to look that up on your own time. So let's go back to where we are today. We had a government shutdown because of the overturning of the Chevron doctrine that said that the United States Incorporated was out of their realm of responsibility. They didn't have a right to create policies, statutes, and codes to enslave the people. That's why President Donald Trump tasked Elon Musk with shutting down the government, or downsizing the government. And then on January 28th, he sent out millions of letters to government workers and gave them the opportunity to retire early. And their deadline was September 30th, the same day as the government shutdown. The government may not ever come back up because it is unlawful treasonous, according to the United States. According to the Supreme Court of the United States, and they had to be taken down. So they may not ever come back. But if in fact President Trump does do some type of reopening of a government, it will most likely be the lawful republic. You see some people fighting against that because the deep state doesn't want to lose their power. And that's why they're instigating protests such as the No Kings protests. And I showed you their website. But President Donald Trump is going to fight back. And he said that he threatens to use his power to invoke the Insurrection Act. You have to pay attention to how mainstream media paints things. They will say he might invoke the Insurrection Act to use his power against the people, but he's using his power because we are under military occupation right now. Remember, we talked about being under martial law because you had rogue people coming in, taking over our government. And we saw that happen with what happened during the votes in 2020. They were taken over. A lot of illegal, unlawful stuff happened in 2020 with the elections. So President Trump is not misusing his power. He's using the power that he was given in order to put us under military law. This one particular article says 34 convictions, chaos kings have been, 34 people have been convicted. They're calling them chaos kings. Trump threatens to use the unquestioned power against his own people, this article says, and it was published yesterday. In an attempt to assert control over the immigrant population in the United States, President Donald Trump has fabricated, this article says, numerous lies and issued empty threats. While this tactic had some success in the past, it hasn't always worked, this article say. But they're saying, and you'll see right here in the second paragraph, that said, President Donald Trump is once again threatening to fully use his power to control Americans, especially the leaders and citizens of Democrat majority cities. In the previous interview, he hinted at invoking the Insurrection Act to address the large protests against ICE in response to their raids affecting several immigrant families. Now, they're going to spin the narrative to make you think that President Trump is invoking the Insurrection Act, or he could, because he's allegedly operating against the people. And they're saying they're fighting against him because they don't like the fact that he has allowed ICE agents and National Guard to deal with the unlawful, illegal immigrants that are here. But we saw through the definition that I showed you that the reason why a president would actually invoke an Insurrection Act is to squelch violent protests or violent activities by the people. And we see that some of these so-called peaceful protests are turning violent. And that's why the article started off with saying 13 people were arrested. And 13 is one of their numbers. It is one of the Freemason numbers. There's a good side to 13, and there's a dark side. 13 is one of their numbers that the Freemasons use, and the dark side of that is supposed to be ominous, something that makes you afraid. But the good side of number 13, actually, if you want to read between the lines, is about peace, power, and prosperity. The ancient civilizations here in America and really all across the globe saw 13 as a high vibrational number that dealt with ascension, prosperity, abundance, etc. So 13 being arrested may have really happened. And, that lets you know that he's about his business, but they're also sending out a coded message. He may, in fact, somebody says, I enjoyed the history lesson. Thank you so much. I am. Cannot wait to share this live with my homeschool. Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you so much. Gratitude. If he does initiate the Insurrection Act, things can get a little scary for people who are out of control, or for people, even for people who are in the know. So what I would encourage people to do is to please prepare just in case they have more lockdowns. You already know that he said he could invoke the Insurrection Act. You already know what the Insurrection Act is. You know that according to the Law of War manual, that there are times when the military can take control of a country, a state, or a city. This is what we're experiencing right now. That's why he deployed the National Guard in 2020, not just to squelch the violence and the protests, but also to maintain order. And that's what he's doing right now. You've seen him send out or deploy troops in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. was the most violent place in America, but he cleaned it up within a matter of, 72 hours. He's doing the same thing in Chicago. He said he's going to do the same thing in New York and L.A. and Baltimore. But it's not going to stop there. He's really got National Guard deployed all over America. This is why around September the 25th, which was the Feast of Trumpets, according to my Hebrew tradition, the Feast of Trumpets is between September 22nd and the 25th. During the Feast of Trumpets, Donald Trump, the Trumping in Zion, the Trump against the deep state, sent a letter to military leaders all over the world and told him to meet him and the Secretary of War, P.E.A.S.E, in Virginia. They televised that meeting. And he told them what their job was to do. Military leaders all over the world met with President Trump and the Secretary of War, which is what it used to be called under our lawful republic. Why do you think he met with the leaders all over the world, military leaders and generals all over the world? He gave them orders to protect and to work alongside him and his administration to protect us. Then on September the 30th, or some days right after, September 30th, you saw a government shutdown. You saw those hundreds of thousands of people leave. And then a couple of days later, you saw him come up with the Department of Peace. And he declared peace in the Middle East during the feast day, right after the Feast of Trumpets, during the Feast of Harvest, also known as the Feast of Tabernacles or the Feast of Booths, Booths. That feast that we celebrate happens around the October the 6th through the 13th. So if you want to look at my history lesson on the feast days, between the Feast of Trumpets and the Feast of Harvest or the Feast of Booths. You can find it on my YouTube channel under This is a Season of Jubilee, where I talk about how all these things have happened under or at the same time as Hebrew holy days, Hebrew festivals. Thank you so much for sending the Cash App blessing or gift. So President Trump deployed troops. He first met with them in Virginia, and then he deployed them all over America. He gave them orders, and they're fulfilling their roles to make sure there's peace all over America and really secretively all over the globe, so that if any of these people that work for the deep state think they're going to fight against him, like the No Kings people and Antifa likes, then they will be squelched immediately. My encouragement to you is stay home. Try not to go in places that are too congested. Try not to align yourself with any, do not align yourself with any violent protests. And if I were you, I wouldn't even be taken to the streets, because you don't know who's infiltrated. You don't know who's a paid agent that will cause problems. Case in point, in Louisville, Kentucky, when George Floyd issue happened and Breonna Taylor issue happened, it happened around the same time, March the 13th. Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and Until Freedom, and the No Effing Around Coalition came into Louisville, Kentucky, organized so-called peaceful protests that were infiltrated by paid agents that work for Black Lives Matter and Antifa. They carried guns to those protests. They took bombs. They took rocks. They took makeshift bombs. And what they did, because I saw the protests going on right in front of my street, was they actually ran, and the National Guard was already deployed. And so were the police, while they were yelling, defund the police, because they were foolish and didn't understand and understand that you can't defund the police before you actually put in a safeguard, something that's going to take over the police department, right? Which will be our sheriff department of the Republic. But you had paid agents, including pastors and lawyers and judges and professionals, many of them in the Black community, so-called Black community and indigenous community, classified as Black, that look like me, who worked for many of these organizations, who were also part of the Boule and secret societies and Black Greek fraternities. They were paid agents along with militia types that were Antifa that came in with weapons. So while people are doing these peaceful protests and singing, "We shall overcome," and "No justice, no peace," these paid agents were throwing makeshift bombs at the police and at the National Guard. And so everybody started throwing them. And so now the National Guard has to respond, because your dumb tail is throwing a makeshift bomb because you allow your emotions to get out of the way when you didn't know a George Floyd or a Breonna Taylor. And even if you did know them, all that yelling, screaming, and hollering to the police didn't cause any peace at all. So they were yelling, screaming, shouting, throwing rocks, throwing bombs, spitting on the National Guard, spitting on the police. I filmed it and I showed it to you all on my Facebook page. Acting like fools. It looked like a war zone. Sirens started going off. People now throwing stuff. And the police maintained their emotional control. I saw it. Didn't pull out a gun until the people got out of control. Then they started shooting rubber pellets. Because people allowed their emotions to get out of the way, because people that look like me got on their radio platforms and their social media platforms and told them to get out on the street and do a peaceful protest when they know they were paid agents. Now, some of them may have had good intentions, but many of them were paid agents. Okay. It got so out of control that the crowd started tearing up stores, tearing up restaurants, breaking the windows of schools, busting down fire departments, police departments, tearing up people's businesses, tearing up ATM machines, stealing out of the stores. You did all that because somebody told you that a George Floyd was taken out. You don't even know if that was AI. You don't even know if that was paid actors. Even if it was real, what did that do to help your community or help you thrive or help your family? How did that really heal America? Because what they don't tell you is that there are more Caucasian people that are beat up by the police than there are people of color. But that news is not projected in mainstream media because they want to cause this racial divide where everybody's fighting against each other. So they tore up Louisville, Kentucky so bad that today in 2025, less than 50% of downtown Louisville, Kentucky is operating. Many of those businesses are still boarded up today, 5 years later, because people couldn't control their emotions. No emotional intelligence, or very little, or easily misled. Pay attention. Lead yourself. You don't need somebody to lead you. Learn to lead yourself. If you need a leader, look to your elders in your own community, of your own bloodline, or look for somebody that has a good mentality, that has morals, principles, and high values, or good morals, principles, and values in your community. Why do you need the television to give you a Steph Curry or whatever these, or an entertainer, or a singer, or somebody to tell you what to do? Or why do you even need a politician to tell you what to do? Lead yourself. You're sovereign. Parents, teach your children at home. Mothers, teach your children at home. Fathers, teach your children at home. Lead your own household. First, lead yourself. Lead your body, lead your mind. Make good decisions, and then teach your children. Because all the mayhem and confusion that I see going on, really nobody fought at the end of the day than ours, because we have participated in the chaos that has caused trouble, mayhem, and confusion in this country. And whether you participate consciously or not, if it's tacit agreement, it's participation. So mind your manners, gain emotional control, stay away from large crowds. Unless you can think of a reason to do a peaceful protest, I would say don't do it, because a lawful protest is a written, notarized document stating your concern or your claim against an entity, and then it goes through certain channels to get handled. Stay away from these protests, because if the National Guard has to shoot rubber bullets at the crowd, your child might get hurt. You might get hurt. And then what's the good? What good was it for? So we could have some type of lockdowns. I'm not saying we will. I'm saying pay attention. President Trump already threatened to use the Insurrection Act, or to invoke the Insurrection Act. Many workers, when he sent out a letter on January 28th, when the president sent out a letter, government workers took buyouts, early buyouts, and they stood down from their jobs. Okay. There are thousands, there are over 700,000 people that left government jobs right now. 300,000 of whom are Black, so-called Black women classified as Black, because a lot of those DEI programs that hired women classified as Black are programs and jobs that we don't even need. So now you got women that are angry, saying, I lost my job. You got women that are angry because they lost their entitlement benefits, or they could lose their Section 8, or they could lose their welfare benefits, their TANF, their temporary assistance for needy families. They could lose their food stamps, and they're being told they're going to lose them by November the 1st, which is just in a couple of days. But what I see President Trump doing, the good side of all that, is setting the stage for Nasara and Jassara, okay? And trying to heal the nuclear family. Because if you give women benefits, and you get, for a long time, I can understand temporary benefits for women and children, or you give them fluff jobs that we really don't need anyway, what happens, and what did happen in my community, I can speak on it, is that a lot of women got arrogant, and a lot of women said, I don't need my husband, I don't need my child's father, I can do it all by myself, I don't need to make babies. Which President Trump has initiatives so that people can procreate. I'm not saying you should tell people to make babies, but how else are you going to thrive as a community, as a nation, unless you have people? You have women saying, I don't need to even try to make this relationship work, because I can just get government assistance, or I can go and get a job and I don't need my mate. I believe women should be able to work, yes, if that's what you desire to do. But I'm telling you, what happened was a lot of these programs and fluff, cushiony jobs that doesn't really matter to make society run. It was given to women so that women can operate independently from the men. And at the same time, you push drugs into the society and into many communities so that the men can get put on drugs, the children can get on drugs, and it causes mayhem and confusion. Control your body, control your mind, control what you see on television, control what you put in your mouth, control who you lay down with, control your thoughts. Exercise some discipline and control. People have gotten out of control. And now, like I said earlier in this podcast, people are saying they're going to steal because they are losing their Section 8 or they might lose their food stamps by November the 1st. And they're being very bold and brazen about how they intend to go right to the store, steal, and incite violence if they have to. Now, on one hand, I know a hungry person that will do whatever they can to eat. But on another hand, what I see is a bunch of confusion. Then you have gang members saying they're going to fight the National Guard and the police. Good luck with that. President Trump has discussed invoking the Insurrection Act as a way to further deploy the military to United States cities, this particular article says. I'll show it to you. Yes, people out here really exposing themselves, just being foolish. The statute has been used by past presidents in moments of extraordinary crisis and political upheaval. Legal experts said it could be difficult to challenge President Trump's authority to use the Insurrection Act. Why do you think it could be difficult to try to go against him? Because we're already under military occupation. We're already under martial law. Please read or just at least peruse through the Department of Defense manual or at least look at videos on it. This article said it could give him extraordinary powers. He already has extraordinary powers. Thank you so much for saying this is a great woman. Y'all better recognize. I appreciate it. So let's use our wisdom, stay focused. Don't allow fear to seep into your consciousness. Know that everything's working for our good. The government had to shut down because it's fake, faux government. The lawful government is called the republic. We have a constitution for our republic. We're going to return to constitutional law and the republic will be restored. After that, we're going to return to more communal ways of living, common law, and people will operate according to their tribal ways. Okay, but first we have to bring back the republic and constitutional law. President Trump is likely, or he has threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act, but he is also doing certain things behind the scenes to restore nuclear families. Now, Black Lives Matter said in their mission statement on their website in 2020 that they were against the nuclear family. They pretended like they cared about Black lives and the Black men who were getting done away with by the police, but their whole mission was against the nuclear family. It was right in their mission statement. And they were funded by Act Blue and the Liberal Party and George Soros. And as you followed the money, you saw that a lot of things they were doing with their money had nothing to do with empowering their own community. They weren't putting jobs in the community. They didn't have programs to help men get jobs or women to get jobs or women to teach the women to raise their children. They sure didn't care enough about so-called Black lives that they stopped people from selling drugs in the community. They sure didn't care enough about so-called Black lives that they went toe-to-toe with gangbangers. And in 2020, I said that. I said, I understand that we have a problem with police brutality. President Trump, we said we have some bad apples in the police department, but we could not defund them at the time. The Communist Chinese Party had intended to, if we defunded the police or overworked them, to then bring in a military that you weren't ready to deal with. So President Trump said under his first administration, there are some bad apples. We have to weed out the bad apples and then we'll retrain the police department. What he didn't go on to say is what we eventually will do will cause the rest of the police departments to stand down. We will downsize the policy enforcement departments or the police departments because they are foreign entities on the land. They enforce policy, statutes, and codes of the United States Incorporated and those 441 or 442 government agencies. They, unbeknownst to them, are not working for the people. The only law enforcers that we're supposed to have, according to our lawful government, the republic, is the sheriff office or the sheriff department. This is why all across America now, small cities, it was started off as small cities, but many cities are downsizing their police departments, retraining those police. They're asking them to retire early. The ones that are left, retraining them. Remember, President Trump said we have some bad apples. We're going to weed them out. Then we're going to retrain the police. They're retraining them, and then they're funneling them and their duties over to the sheriff's department. Because again, according to our lawful government, the republic, the only law enforcers that are allowed to be on this land are the sheriff, the people that work for the sheriff department. I remember a time when we had sheriffs in our neighborhood, and they would deputize like common folk to work along with the sheriff department. And they all looked like the people in your community. They were your uncles and your cousins. They didn't have to carry guns and badges. Most of them, some of them did, but a lot of them didn't, because they would just drag you by the ear or take you to mama, papa, big mama, and say, I saw little Johnny over here stealing from the store. Then mama or papa would spank you, take you back to the store, and make you work off what you stole. You didn't see a bunch of police cars running up and down the street, and you didn't have a whole lot of crime when I was growing up either. We're going to restore law and order, which President Trump has said before. So again, he threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act, but we already have National Guard on the grounds. Many articles have said more than 750,000 federal workers have been furloughed. You have women saying their food stamps will be cut off by November the 1st. You have 300,000 women that are classified as Black that have lost their jobs because they were hired under DEI programs, who are now wondering what they're going to do. You know what? I know a man by the name of Kevin Samuels who told y'all 2 years ago, or told us 2 years ago, winter is coming. Remember that? I know a man by the name of Kevin Samuels that said some of y'all women, or some of us women, need to learn how to have a marriage culture and get along with our children's fathers. I remember a man by the name of Kevin Samuels that said some of us are going to have to learn how to be okay with working in collaboration with a husband. And people called him misogynistic. They said he was hateful. He hated women. They always talked about him saying you hit the wall, but they took his words out of context. What he said is, once you reach a certain age, this is biology. He was harsh with his words, but you know, when you grow up under a strict mother, harsh words don't mean that they don't make you cry and whine like a little baby. When you grow up under discipline, order, and structure, somebody telling you like it is, that make you whine and cry and complain. When you grow up under leadership like strong pastors and a husband and uncles who correct you quickly when you get out of order, after training you and teaching you how to behave, you don't mind a man saying the truth, that once a woman gets a certain age, the doctors will say that if she has a baby, it could have some medical issues. He called it hitting the wall. You can call it whatever you want. He had a lot of women angry, taking to their podcast, getting all mad, talking about they don't need a man. They don't know, I can do what I want. I'm a boss bee. I'm a boss chick. I got a job. Well, a lot of these women now that had all these government jobs are now without a job. And I feel sorry about it. But what I'm saying is, he told you winter is coming. And now here we are. And all the people thought they were big and bad. They don't need a man. They don't even have to work because they got all these entitlement programs. Now, guess what? They're looking for a man or another woman to lay under. I'm not saying people weren't abused. I'm not saying the patriarchy didn't have a dark side. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying is we gonna all have to learn how to get along. How about that? Fellas, hold the line. Be patient. We women coming back home. Some of us coming back home. I see it happening already. Women, be patient. The men that were doing the red pill thing, saying they don't need y'all, they gonna do it on their own. Y'all think Black men are the only ones that did red pill? There was men going their own way before this new red pill stuff. Men going to MGTOW. In early 1990s. You think the passport bros is a new thing? Man, European Men been doing that for ages, getting a woman from another country. That's nothing new. And I'm all for it. Do whatever you marry and love with who can be in alignment with your vision, goals, and purpose. All I'm saying is a lot is happening that could lead to people getting upset and wanting to take to the streets. We are now at day 23 of the government shutdown. It is tied with the 1995-1996 shutdown as the second largest or longest shutdown in United States history. We're on day 23, family. Red pills are sleeping pills. Day 23, the second longest shutdown in American or United States history. Let's see if this article comes up. What is the latest on the shutdown? President Donald Trump told top Democratic lawmakers on yesterday, Tuesday, October 21st, that he has no plans to meet with them until the now 22-day, that was yesterday, government program shutdown ends. He said, I would like to meet with both of them, but I said one little caveat. I will only meet if they let the country open. But it's funny because he's blaming this shutdown on the Democrats because the Democrats want to give medical benefits to illegal aliens. And that's true, but it's also because they have to shut down. They're unlawful. The Supreme Court of the United States overturned the Chevron doctrine, called the government and all the 441 entities unlawful and treasonous. They had to come down. The government had to shut down. So this is the second longest day. I don't know if it'll ever open. I said that earlier in the podcast. So just be prepared for an announcement. We could have lockdowns. We could have an emergency broadcast system announcement. We could have military, implement some type of curfews, just like what happened during 2020, because the deep state doesn't want to step down and lose their power. But I will tell you, whatever happens, when it goes down, because we heard there will be an emergency broadcast system announcement and some disclosures that will happen, the truth will get out. Mainstream media will no longer be able to tell lies. Did you know that the Pentagon confiscated bags of defense reporters? They called this a dark day. This just happened the other day, October 15th, last week. Nearly every Pentagon reporter from almost every major media outlet, according to this article, in America, turned in their press badges on Thursday, October the 15th, after refusing to endorse the Defense Department's new rules that they say would make it impossible to do their jobs independently. Press groups said that the unprecedented restrictions contravene the First Amendment. Oh yeah, they're going to say it's against our right, free press or whatever. But the mainstream media, they don't do free press. They don't do unbiased reporting. They spin the narrative to support the deep state's narrative. But now they're saying this is unlawful. This is unprecedented. They took away our press badges. This is what they're saying. Today, the Defense Department confiscated the badges of the Pentagon reporters from virtually every major media organization in America. The Pentagon Press Association members are still committed to reporting on the United States military, so they say. That's what they wrote. But make no mistake, on today, October the 15th, that happened last week, it's a dark day for the press, according to mainstream media. And for press freedom that raises concerns about a weakening United States commitment to transparency and governance, to public accountability at the Pentagon, and to free speech at all. And then they said the Department of Defense did not immediately respond to this particular publication in response to these allegations. But we do know that the Pentagon announced the new restrictions last month, and they gave newsrooms these orders, and they gave them until Tuesday to commit to adhering to the rules. So all of their badges have been collected. Media companies broadly rejected the pledge, claiming it will criminalize national security reporting and expose those who signed the contract. You see, they're trying to make President Donald Trump and his administration look like they're the criminals, look like he's a tyrant, look like he's the one that's trying to be a ruler and an overlord. But what he's doing is his job. You know, people have become so complacent with men just placating to the emotions of the deep state. They have been so conditioned to men wearing dresses and so conditioned to men eating a lot of soy and tofu. So they become kind of weak and passive. They've become so conditioned to men not being able to say how they really feel. They've been so conditioned to men not being to stand up as leaders, to be weak, jelly back, wobbly kneed, nincompoops like Kaepernick, who took a knee for the sake of justice. They so used to seeing people take knees and cast negative affirmations like I can't breathe and hands up, don't shoot. They're so used to men not being able to say what they need and what they want, or to lead like they're supposed to. They're so used to men not being real warriors, which is who they were created to be, that when a man steps up and asserts his masculine authority and say, I'm gonna blow this ish up if y'all don't bring in some law and order, that they think any discipline, order, and structure is being rogue. It's a new day. It's a new day. They're so used to telling you that masculinity is toxic and that all men are narcissistic. And they're so used to arrogant, masculine acting. I know I'm acting masculine right now in my teaching capacity. We're all masculine energy, but masculine and feminine energy. They're so used to women taking to their platform saying men are no good, men ain't ish. I don't need a man. I'm a boss B. I'm a boss chick. Men, all they want is sex. Men this, men beat me. Men are fine. Blah, 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 blah. Forcing men to be politically correct. Forcing their sons to be taught to wear dresses or to change their sex, or change their daughter to wear sex, and to forcing people to do things that only adults should be doing if it's their will and their desire based on their own morals and principles, that they don't know a real man when they see one. Well, now guess what? You're going to F around and find out. You mess with Donald Trump in the military if you want to. You can think you big and bad and a big and bad gangbanger if you want to. You're going to find yourself in prison or 6 feet under. Stay home. Stay out of these people's faces. Learn some self-control and emotional control. Learn to keep your mouth shut. Learn order. Learn to stop allowing people to push your buttons. Takes a lot of emotion control. You know, in 2020, when Breonna Taylor was unalived and George Floyd, I took to a platform on one of the gentlemen who has a radio station there, and I said, family, please, I implore you, because it went out to all the churches and everybody in the so-called Black community that watches this particular station, please maintain emotional control. And I told them when COVID first started, be careful, they're going to do something. And I said, there's going to be a Black Swan event. And then that next year, because COVID started 2019, 2020, we had George Floyd unalive, Breonna Taylor. I told y'all, I said in 2019, be careful, they're going to say the Black Swan event. Who you think you are? You rock with Donald Trump. You've been rocking with him since he first came. You a Black slave. You a this, you a that. You a white supremacist. Oh, they call me Uncle Tom. They call me all kind. You an N-word. You a this, you a that. I'll grape you. They said, I'll assault you. These were men in my community. It got so bad, my sons had to take up arms and say, okay, we gonna come out blazing and protect my mama. Y'all better jump back. So I said, maintain your emotions in 2019. They're gonna do a Black flag event. They did it in 2020. I came back on. I said, maintain your control. Stock up on food, stock up on water. They're going to have a shutdown. They're going to have curfews. National Guard's gonna be on the grounds. I didn't have any proof this was going to happen. I was speaking by unction of the Spirit of the Most High, the Creatress, the Creator. Okay. Then it happened. I said, do not fight the police. Stay indoors. They did it. Some of them got shot with rubber pellets. Then it got bad. Some people got unalive with real guns because they wanted to shoot back at the police. Then I said, maintain your control. Focus on yourself and your family. Get food. Don't be out here breaking and stuff. They did it anyway. They tore up their own neighborhoods. They tore up downtown. Then the elderly people couldn't get their food and their medicine because they done tore up the drugstores. And these women who have no control of themselves or their sons because they won't let them have a relationship with their daddy, or maybe their daddy is absent because he done something bad, or maybe he's absent because the women and the mother didn't get along. Their children was out in the streets, these women and these men's children. But the women was out in the street, but their children acting a fool, and some of the men. Then I said, use that same energy to clean up the community classified as Black, because Louisville, Kentucky has a high violence and high crime rate. Use it to clean up your own community. Why don't you go to the drug user, the drug seller's house and the gangbanger's house? And why don't you tell them to stop doing what they're doing? If you got that much energy and that much strength, men and women, and that much gumption in you to face a United States military, National Guard, and police officers, then surely you can use that same energy to tell a gangbanger to stop killing up your children and the drug user to stop selling drugs. They ridiculed me. They talked about me. They laughed me to scorn and called me a white supremacist. You rocking with white folk. I said, no, I'm about everybody. I'm about order. But if I want order, order starts in your home. It should start in your own community. Sadly, one of my closest friends told me she didn't want anything else to do with me because I was rocking with white folk. And I didn't understand that even her sons rocked with the criminals, and my sons are friends with the drug dealers, and my sons and the drug dealers, I raised them together, and they done things together, but I love them all. And you're talking against my sons, and I said, then correct them. Well, some things just happen in the community because they can't get jobs. I said, did they apply? Did you raise them to get a job? Where's their daddy? You didn't have 5 husbands. Where are their fathers? Get some order in your house. She did it. Sadly, after she severed ties with me and didn't want me talking that white supremacy bull crap about how getting order in the Black community, one of her sons passed. Gun violence. Sadly. A few years later, the last son, she had 2, they both died, got killed, gun violence. Because we were so focused on what was going on outside of our community to people we don't even know about. So focused trying to take down a system that's so much bigger than us that we couldn't control a system in our own households. And their sons, a lot of whom I was trying to cry out to, that's not the only two. Her only sons now have children without a daddy. And a lot of people dealt with the same consequences because they wanted to take to the streets and buy into whatever was going on instead of correcting themselves in their own houses. We have to maintain control. We have to get order. Interestingly enough, I thought that it was very, very peculiar that President Trump said the other day, we have Darth Vader. I want y'all to look that up because I don't have time to go over it. I'm going over my time. He said, we have Darth Vader. And I asked one of my friends who's a Murray from I won't go into too much who he is. What could that mean? So somebody look up the gematria of Darth Vader. But he said, we have Darth Vader. And when I asked him, what can you decode that? He said, well, Trump's job is to turn darkness to light. Some people look at Trump as dark, but he's saying we have Darth Vader. We have the darkness. We're going to reestablish law and order. He said, and then pay attention to the fact that they had a lighting ceremony right after he said that. He said they were lighting candles, and he said that represents a journey of the souls traveling towards the light. And he was telling me about numerology, how that was done at exactly 4:55, and 4 + 10 = 41. He's always said 41 equals kings. 14 equals white supremacy, which had nothing to do with color complexion. White supremacy is a system that was put in place by the deep state to cause chaos and confusion to control really the whole planet. But he said, when you see 14, that's about white supremacy. And President Trump, you'll see 14 in some of his codes saying he's doing away with that systemic ideology of having different systems in place to enslave people. And then you see 41, which which deals with kings. And that means that the kings are being, not king, but kings are being reinstated to their royalty. Kings being we the people, kings, sovereignty, we're being restored back to our sovereign capacity. So this lighting, I want to look up the candle lighting ceremony. He said represents the journey of souls traveling towards the light. So when Trump said I have Darth Vader, he was saying in essence and codes that he is taking control of the dark, returning us to the light from darkness to light. And my friend also said that lighting ceremony, if I can find a picture, had people that were East Indians. And he said, again, that's coded messages. The Indians were doing this, just like to represent indigenous people or mimic a model indigenous people on the land, which are Indians here, the copper color races found by Christopher Columbus. So President Trump is turning things back over to the land, the chiefs on the land, the people who had control of their own land and government before it was overtaken by the bloodline families. The takeaway from this is that when you know what's happening and you can see the coded messages and you see how the deep state is trying to fight back against President Donald Trump, who was tasked by the military to take the deep state down, when you look at it and you understand and understand what's actually going on, then you can use your mind to read between the lines. Not only use your mind to read between the lines, but call in peace. President Trump he initiated peace in the Middle East, and he came up with created the Department of Peace. He declared peace in the Middle East during the Feast of Harvest, Feast of Tabernacles, also known as Feast of Booths or Sukkot. Okay, all that happened between October the 13th and October the 15th. So peace is being initiated and brought back into our consciousness and back into reality. Command peace, know that peace exists. Create peace in your house, create peace in your life, create peace in your community. Maintain your emotions, have some emotional intelligence, keep your emotions in check. Know that, yes, welfare benefits might go away. They may not ever return under the government. There may not be Section 8. There may not be TANF, temporary assistance for needy families. There may not be food stamps. There may not be government aid as we knew it or entitlement benefits. There may not even be Social Security as we know it. Why? Why can I say that so emphatically? Even President Donald Trump said himself, Social Security, Medicare, they're going to be gone. The point of contention leading to the government shutdown is the Democrats' refusal to accept that would cut health care provisions, which many Republicans argue that these provisions fund medical care for illegal aliens. Social Security and Medicare represent vital support for tens of millions of Americans, especially retirees, seniors, and individuals with disabilities. As of late 2024, Social Security provided monthly benefits to more than 53 million Americans, which is nearly 16% of the United States population. Medicare and Medicaid underpin health insurance availability for seniors, low-income people, and many vulnerable groups. Any reduction or administrative change to these programs has far-reaching implications for millions of people who rely on them for basic income or to bring in NASARA, the National Economic Security and Reformation Act, which we know we're going to do, and I've reported that extensively. Why do you need government aid? Any aid coming from the United States Incorporated will cease and desist because the United States Incorporated is in debt. They've reached a critical number. They've hit the debt ceiling. And they're bankrupt and defunct, and they're closed. The government is closed. So there's a song that came out that said, "Don't worry, be happy." You can be happy when you know you're God, you have dominion, and you can call in and command things and laws and wealth to be in alignment with your words, because words cast spells. That's why they call it spelling. You have the power to call in wealth, to call in peace, to call in abundance, because you are God's, or spirit and flesh, however you want to see it. having a human experience, or children of God, and you have dominion and power. Claim it. Change your perception of things. I put up a video of me transforming into a lioness, and some people's like, oh, you look evil, you look creepy. I said, maybe change your perception, because a lioness appears to be creepy or evil to somebody that's afraid or somebody that can't fight a lioness. But to another lioness or a lion or somebody that's on her level and has the same fighting capacity as she will look at a lioness as a comrade, not as a threat. Sometimes you have to change your perception. You are literally God's having a human experience or spirit. You have power, you have dominion. Have you ever noticed that when you talk about problems all day long, you stay in a low vibrational frequency? If you talk about how much you can't do something, then you find out that you can't. But when you operate from a mindset of being thankful and you start literally naming one by one all the things for which you're grateful, how it raises your vibrations and you feel better. Have you ever noticed when you think about what it's going to feel like to have those Nasara benefits and that wealth to come to you, and you close your eyes and you think about how excited you're going to be to actually implement your humanitarian projects to help people? When you close your eyes and think about what it's going to feel like to have access to your Social Security bond, to have access to tremendous amount of wealth, to have access to all of the currencies that will revalue, that you'll be able to exchange for a higher rate. When you actually think about how the silver you bought years ago for $11, $14 is now $54 an ounce, and you've made a great return on your investment. When you think about how excited that is, when you think about how the Pope on December the 24th, 2024, opened the Jubilee doors, which was a ritual, and how he said this is a ritual of Jubilee. Look it up. He opened about 7 doors that he called portals to the Jubilee. Then you know that was an indication of foreshadowing that we're going to have a debt jubilee in biblical proportions. That's why on that same day that the Pope opened up one of those portals or those doors that he called Jubilee doors, on that same day of December 24th, 2024, Zero Hedge came out with an article and published it that says you're about to experience a debt jubilee in biblical proportions. Are you ready? Because historically, this has happened throughout time. Ancient civilizations have always had a remedy for debt. Whenever the governments hit a debt ceiling and they were over their eyeballs, or that they had so much debt, they owed so many nations, or even their people had so much debt, they had agreements to different nations to completely forgive the debt of their people and between each other, between the nations. It's something that societies have done for eons. It's something that we Hebrew people do every 7 years. It's called the Shemitah or Shemitah. And then you count 7 times 7 years. On the 49th year, you do the same thing because it's a 7th year. But on the 50th year, you have a huge celebration that we call the Jubilee. This is the 50th Jubilee year. We will have a debt jubilee that will wipe out all debt, cancel out all credit card, bank loans, student loans, car loans, all that. And you will have what's considered a universal basic income, which are Nasara benefits and National Economic Security and Reformation Act. And the global version is the Global Economic Security and Reformation Act. All study those acts. I've done podcasts. I'll do another one on it. All those will put money into the hands of the people, tens of thousands each month. I heard somebody just call me the other day and said, you've been talking about Nasara since President Trump's first administration. You were the first person I ever heard talk about that, about 2017. He said, now people are starting to talk about how we could have universal basic income. How can President Trump do that? Because when he first came back in his second term, he created the Sovereign Wealth Fund. What was the Sovereign Wealth Fund? The fund comprised of stocks, bonds, tariffs, taxes for taxing other countries, rare earth minerals, silver and gold, and all that sovereign wealth fund is for we the American people. It will go to help we the American people. My name is Dr. Kia Pruitt. Thank you for listening to me today. I gotta go. Thank you for your cash apps. When I come back, I will acknowledge if you want to contribute to my work. You can send a cash app to $Mama Kia 13. I hope I said something to raise your vibrations and inspire you to create the most amazing, magnificent life that you desire and deserve. Please go over to my members only section if you care to hear the podcast about what to do to prepare to become wealthy and help your family have multi-generational wealth. Peace, family. Go out and make this a great day. Bye-bye.